Listen to better music and listen to music better. Welcome to True Tunes at 45 RPM, the ongoing conversation you'll hear on the True Tunes podcast and in the digital pages at truetunes.com. And now your host, John J. Thompson.
Hello, and welcome back to this special series of conversations captured on location at the Audiofeed Festival in Urbana, Illinois. In addition to booking me to perform as an artist at the festival, the organizers usually have me do a session or two as a speaker. This year, I decided to cover a topic that I have found myself talking about with friends and students quite a bit over the last year. I dialed in some of the details a bit while I was teaching over spring break in Hawaii, and felt that the Audiofeed Festival would be a good place to refine it even further. The title of my talk was The Sound of Revolution, and as I think you'll see, my intent was to allow the audience to help form what we would talk about in our allotted time. They certainly rose to the occasion. Although we opened an audience mic for back and forth discussion, some technical bumps prevented the use of much of that dialogue.
My name is John Thompson, and it is good to meet you. I don't want to assume that any of you know who I am, though I see some familiar faces. So I want to give you just a very, very brief bio, and then I want to ask you a question, and that question, the answer, your answers to that question will greatly influence our conversation. So I'll be 55 day after tomorrow. I have spent my whole life in the music industry. I'm a songwriter and an artist, and when I was a kid, I was at the very first Cornerstone festival. I was 13, almost turning 14, and a revolution happened in my own life, in my own heart. And I felt like a revolution was happening around me with a lot of other people. It actually changed the direction of my life in a lot of ways. And it did, there was sort of, I don't want to get too Pentecostal about it, but a sort of vision opened up for me of how I might spend my life, how I might invest my life. I went home and I wrote this manifesto over the next year. It was about an 80 to 100 page spiral-bound notebook of all the stuff that I felt like I was supposed to do. And I've done everything in that book and more that I got the vision for at that first Cornerstone. It was revolutionary to me. My career, my work, took me into literally the middle of the mainstream music industry. I spent 10 years working in publishing at EMI and then Capitol Christian Music Group. Never thought I'd find myself there. But before that, I spent years with a company that I started called True Tunes, which was a record store and a concert venue and a magazine that ended up going all over the world. Didn't think that would have the impact that it had. The vision was, I'm going to be in a band, and I'm going to write songs, and I'm going to reach kids that are just as screwed up as me, and I just want to have a day job that will allow me to make music. So True Tunes was going to be my day job. The year I launched True Tunes at Cornerstone, this was in 1989, when I was 18, almost turning 19. I launched True Tunes at Cornerstone, and True Tunes blew up in one day. My band also played the first day that we did what's later became known as the impromptu stage. I brought a PA and I found an outlet, and I asked the director, hey, could we just set up over there where it says swine? Seems appropriate. And just play over there. And he's like, look, you can do whatever you want. Because I was donating almost all of the money from the True Tunes store. I kept 10%, donated everything else. So he's like, you play wherever you want. He goes, I'll put you on the main stage if you want. I'm like, no, we're not ready for that. But just over there by the swine sign, we'll just play over there. So that was my band's debut at Cornerstone. And, maybe a few hundred people stand around and go, yeah, they're okay. But True Tunes took off. And from that day forward, I was Mr. True Tunes, and my band was always the thing that the guy from True Tunes is doing. So I was like, oh, I've ruined my life. On day one, I was like, I had a major crisis. I was like, this is not how my life was supposed to go. Well, that continued to grow and then crash and burn. Whole other story. I could tell you some other time. And then I ended up going to work for Cornerstone. And by the time I was 32, I was the main stage MC. I was handling all the sponsorships. I was the one guy that their one friend who actually knew how the music business worked, right? So I could go to Nashville and meet with people, and I could line up sponsors and get the big screen paid for and all that stuff. So I worked the music business side of things for Cornerstone. Did that for a number of years and ended up moving to Nashville from Chicago 18 years ago. And after we decided to move there, which really had nothing to do with the music business, why we went there because I was pastoring this little countercultural church in Aurora, Illinois, and learning a lot about community and a lot about just the importance of things being small and intimate. And we felt like we should do that in Nashville. We had always been avoiding Nashville. We called it our Nineveh. We would go anywhere in the world. We went to Europe many times. I went to Latin America. Anywhere God wants us to go, but not Nashville, because I had this perception of Nashville from having gone there so many times for the music business, and it was tainted, and I just didn't want to go to Nashville. Finally, in 2007, we felt like that was where we were supposed to be, and it has been where we're supposed to be. So, there's all that in a nutshell. I want to ask you, you're here because this thing is called Sound of a Revolution. There's a lot of mess in the world right now. And I think most of us can go back and we think about when have things been this disrupted and disruptive, and how the arts and music have come out of those eras. Is music inherently connected to revolution? You know, it usually at least comes from it. What does that sound like? When do we want to hear music now that supports fruitful, spiritual, relevant, countercultural passion? Are we looking for some kind of movement now that we can get behind and find some excitement and passion about? I kind of do. And so what would that kind of revolution sound like? So when I just bring that up, what does revolution sound like? What are some ideas that come to you? Or what are some questions you would like us to explore in the next 40 minutes or so?
Is confrontational and challenges expectations or assumptions?
So the sound of revolution should be confrontational and
Challenge like assumptions.
Assumptions, challenge assumptions, good. Confrontational, challenge assumptions, that's good. What else?
Catharsis and emotional healing.
Ooh, I like catharsis and healing. Like you can't get to the healing sometimes until you just spew everything out first and say, this is how I'm feeling, whether it's rational or not. You just gotta cry and scream and sometimes have that sponge wrung out. And then you want something to feel that you can feel some healing. So that's part of revolution as well. That's really good, yeah.
How do you speak truth that might offend people without losing those?
How do you speak truth that might offend people without losing those people? Boy, that's really important, because there's at least two big things in there. Is it truth, right? And are you speaking it in love, and is there enough of a foundational relationship where they can feel that love and receive the challenge? And are you actually, in speaking truth, also listening, and are you teachable as well? So that's really important. Yeah.
Promoting unity.
Promoting unity. So if we're talking about revolution, is unity inherent in revolution? We talk about promoting unity, that's a common theme. Something in our hearts, Ecclesiastes 3 says, I've planted the eternal in you. It's almost like a homing beacon that somehow God put in us that's drawing us towards the eternal. And I think unity is one of those things. Let's watch out for unity being a distraction from justice. Right? There's a lot of people during the suffrage movements and during the anti-slavery movements that would say, hey, you speaking that justice message is causing disunity in the church. And we would say, yeah, well, sometimes there's things that are more important than unity, right? But we are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord. There is a hunger for unity, and if we can lean into that unity, that can be the sound of of revolution when the unity we're talking about is driven by the Spirit and it's being united in Christ, not united in compromise. Yeah.
Usually starts out non-commercial.
And then very quickly becomes commercial. We're going to get to that.
I was thinking revolution, we think of tearing things down.
Right.
But do we have a vision also of what we're going to put?
Starts with tearing things down, but does it go far enough? Do we have enough prophetic imagination to think about what are we going to build after we've done the tearing down? Tearing down stuff is easy. We are seeing that happen right now in our government and our culture. Tear things up, just tear it down. Get people mad enough, they can empower you to tear things apart. Is there a vision for what should be built to replace what you've torn down? Right? So that's really good. When I think about the sound of revolution in my generation, I grew up always wishing I had been born like 10, 15 years earlier, because the music of the 60s, the counterculture of the 60s was so awesome. It was so much better than the music of the 80s, right? I mean, I like 80s music. I love U2. I love new wave music. But, man, you think about Woodstock, right? You think about the counterculture. You think about the civil rights era. And the thing is, like you mentioned, stuff started non-commercial, but really the message, the music that we have seen, the artifacts that have been left for us are all very commercial. They're films, they're records, they're products, they're things that have been turned into plastic and sold, and lots of money have been made off of it. So we have a very commercial version of revolutionary products that we can go, ooh. A lot of people are saying, where's the revolutionary music happening now? The revolutionary music that happened then, I would argue, was the tip of the iceberg. It happened after lots and lots of stuff happened under the radar. Lots of small-scale stuff. In our world, in the sort of spiritual family tree of this sort of thing, when we talk about what was called the Jesus movement, some of you might have seen the Jesus music movie that I was in way too much. Didn't think I was going to be in it as much as I was. They left me in there to be the kind of black shirt wearing negative voice. That's okay, at least I got the good role. But the Jesus movement that today's evangelical people like to position and locate in Southern California with music that sounds a lot like today's CCM and modern worship, they're cherry picking based on the products that came out of that, right? Life magazine and Time magazine went and took a bunch of pictures at Calvary Chapel of really attractive looking, cool Southern California people. That makes good copy. And so all of a sudden the story gets reduced to a Jesus revolution happening in Southern California, when the history of the Jesus movement goes back to the 50s, and it's largely in the Catholic Church, it's in the global South, it's in Europe. In America, it's happening in Florida and Chicago, it's in Canada, it's in the Pacific Northwest. Even in California, it's happening in San Francisco way before it's happening in Southern California. Are you guys hearing about that? No. And there's some really goofball stories too. There's like fundamentalists in San Francisco that are doing these cool-ish ministries to drug addicts where they're like, hey, we want to love on you, we want to help you get clean off of heroin, but you got to wear a tie and read the King James Bible. And kind of like, we're going, oh, wait, that's not going to be really cool in a movie at all, right? So we're not going to tell that story. The revolution that got televised, it's like the grandchild of what has been happening organically in the hearts and minds of people all over the world. We have to be careful because it starts non-commercial, it becomes commercial, and then we think of and romanticize the commercial version. We have constantly been taught to judge the efficacy of things based on the values of the Industrial Revolution and modern American commerce. We think, even most Christians tend to think, if it's big, it must be working. If it sells, it must be good, right? If I taste it and I like the taste of it, it must be good, right? These are all of our values are more formed by the values of commerce than they are formed by the values of the Spirit.
We all need a cause we can live for, something we can believe in. From life's beginning to life's end, as men we just can't ignore all this pain that surrounds us. Here's a basis for living, relief from life's pains to be given. But in what cause can we trust? Can we trust now? Ooh, come join me in a revolution against the constitution of the institution of sin.
So, when we talk about counterculture, are we really being countercultural or are we being subcultural? And I would argue that the Christian culture since the early 70s, really probably since about 72, it's hard to, there's not like one pinpoint. We like that when we're making stories and we're writing articles. But there's a big difference between being countercultural and being subcultural. So a counterculture is a group that wants to actively subvert and change the prevailing culture, right? Their job is not, they're not trying to exist within the culture and make peace with it. They don't care about unity, right? They want to subvert it. So in the 50s and 60s, when the civil rights movement was happening, the counterculture was saying, we want to change the prevailing rules and laws and culture that are keeping people of color from having the right to vote, that are keeping separate drinking, all that stuff. They wanted to change the culture. That's counterculture. Now, subculture is going to be when a group exists within a culture. They don't really care about changing the mainstream culture. I put some cool goth kids up here. You can't really see. They have so much white makeup on, they're already dissolved into the background. But and you know that I play with one of these bands sometimes. So this is close to me. That's why I can put my people up there. But the goth kids don't want everybody to become goth. That would be the worst thing to happen, right? Because then they're not cool anymore. They're not different. Subcultures exist within larger cultures. They just want to maintain a unique identity within that culture. They zig when the rest of the culture zags to an extent. They are still largely defined by their consumption, even if they are defined by being antithetical to that consumption in some ways. Their values will diverge, but they are still a subculture. They have no intention of subverting the entire culture. There might be small variances within their value system, relatively speaking. To them, they don't feel small, but if we were to look at it and extrapolate it at a wide level, there would be relatively small variances. The key thing is subcultures are not trying to change the overall culture. They are trying to gather people into their tribe to form community and sometimes make a wild amount of money, right? And I'm not talking that, I don't think that there's a huge amount of money in goth culture, right? But what are some subcultures that you can see happening within America today, in your culture? You see subcultures that they don't want to change the mainstream culture, but they're doing they're turning a profit. What are some subcultures? They don't, by this definition, just trying to draw people into their tribe, make some money, sell some swag, some books. What are some of those?
Instagram health influencers?
Health influencers, that's great. They definitely would all be out of business if the whole world went that way. But they can form their little cults, their little subsets, and they can have a little bubble within there. And they want to pull just enough people in there, right? So that's good. What else?
Pop culture.
Pop culture, yeah. Boy, when they finally got things legal, I was like, oh no, now what are we gonna do? Like, oh, well, some of them are capitalizing it on it, yeah, but it had to change it. But, you know, that's an example of it going from subculture to like bigger mainstream culture. What else? Sports, like different sports can create a subculture thing. Music can be a big subculture thing. Fashion. I would argue that the church, the evangelical church in particular, but really all churches, operate more, instead of being countercultural, which they like to think they are. There might be certain issues in which they push against the culture and want to change the culture, but by and large, they function more like subcultures. So when I went to Cornerstone, I grew up Episcopalian and it was part of this church that has this ancient liturgical thing. And a lot of times it felt a little bit disconnected. It was just kind of what you grow up in. But there's things I appreciated about it. And they were very tolerant of letting us kids do kind of whatever we wanted to do. One benefit was I never once heard an Episcopalian priest or youth pastor or parent ever say that music is the devil's music. Now, a friend of mine in school who went to an evangelical free church, her parents thought jungle music, oh my gosh, took me about 15 minutes to realize what they meant by that. Like, who lives in the jungle? Oh, brown people. So the music that comes from the jungle was automatically satanic because black people are automatically satanic. It's like, oh, I never heard that in my church. I didn't grow up in that culture. But when I went to Cornerstone and I found out there's this group of hundreds of people living together in community, sharing everything, actually being countercultural, like not participating in the normal economy, not sharing in that, I was like, whoa, that is punk rock. Like the punks who act all punk, but it's just a subculture, it was like, okay. But the people who truly live it, who don't actually have individual bank accounts and don't, like that is counterculture. And then I went to Cornerstone and said, okay, for a while I thought I'm going to go live there, but then I just never felt a peace about that. I was supposed to be countercultural outside of it, but with their supports. They became sort of extension of my family and mentors and things like that. So now we got to think, if we want to see a revolution now, if we're going to have to start with it being countercultural. Because subcultural is just marketing. Really, if you want to be subcultural, you can just choose a niche, identify the market, find out what they want, give them the product that they want, tweak it. That's the marketing cycle, and I can actually teach that to you pretty well. But that's not revolutionary. Even innovating a new product that people haven't heard of before, a new kind of blender or a new app, that might be considered revolutionary. It's really just evolutionary. When you want to talk about being revolutionary, you're going to have to go into the culture and subvert it by saying the prevailing values here are corrupt, we do not accept them, and we want to turn this around. But we have to cast a vision for what is better. Just burning things down is not enough. If we're not winning people into an idea of a vision that is bigger and more beautiful and more winsome than the chaos and corruption and sleaze that we see right now, all we're doing is setting things on fire. The sad thing is, the way things are going right now, when things get bad enough, for a lot of people, setting things on fire is progress. And that's where we're kind of heading. Things are gonna get so bad this way that you'll see revolutions that are purely destructive. Being citizens of a kingdom, a spiritual kingdom, we have an inheritance that we have examples, even in the scriptures, of people that had no intention of overthrowing Rome. They had no intention of overthrowing the temple system. They were stuck between religious hypocrisy and political power, but they weren't worried about either of those things. Yet they were revolutionary in the power of their love, in the way they could upset everything and turn it over. What did they do? They offered a vision of a totally different way of living. But who did it attract? It's probably some examples of some people with some money and some power and some influence that were on the margins of that. For the most part, it attracted the least of these. It attracted the people at the bottom of the pile, right? So another thing that we're going to have to disabuse ourselves of here is thinking that we win when we attract the influencers, when we attract the people with the money. What were the prevailing values of the 50s? Conformity, security, stability, tradition, consumerism, and materialism. I could unpack all this, but in the 50s, this would be the prevailing values. And it's easy for some of us to poo-poo this and say, what a bunch of sticks in the mud. Why do you suppose the 50s parents were so committed to conformity, security, stability, tradition, and consumerism and materialism? Yes?
Because it was the opposite of the a war experience they had just gone through.
Yes. They had just survived World War II. Yeah.
And the Depression.
And their parents had probably survived the Depression. So there's still echoes of the Depression. Then they get through World War II. This is the opposite of that. So actually, this is, in a way, an echo of a countercultural response to what they were clinging to. It was almost like a whiff of the kingdom that they were probably hungry for in their hearts, and they didn't even know it. Maybe they did know it, and the church was just using this hunger to get them to conform to a pattern of this world, and the church people didn't even know it. So the counterculture kids show up in the 60s. They're saying, wait. We got Vietnam. You're fighting against the rights of black people. You're destroying the environment. And those three main points, there's lots of subtexts under all of those, they lead to the prevailing values of the counterculture of the 60s: questioning authority, revealing insecurity and instability, personal and community expression, diversity and alternative experiences, sexual liberation, empowerment of minorities, and environmental concerns. All of them can be attached to the inverse of their parents' generations, because their parents' perceived values did not provide the security that they were seeking. Social activism and media also came into its own during this. So it wasn't just limited to regional things where people could get together once in a while and talk one-on-one. Now we have records, universities, music, poetry, cinema. There's all this, these values can spread farther and wider, quicker than ever before.
Don't go away. The True Tunes podcast will be right back after this. We're back with the True Tunes podcast.
What are today's mainstream values? Individual achievement, perceived freedom. Even if we're not really free, we want to feel like we're free, right? We got to definitely feel free, even if the chains are invisible. Brand loyalty. We're loyal to our brands, whether it's bands that we love so much it hurts, whether it's the cigarettes we smoke, the toothpaste that we use who changes toothpaste every month? You do? Really? You're crazy. You got a problem, we should probably talk. Here's the thing, this is how our brain works, and this is actually probably I think it's a God-designed thing. If every time you went to buy toothpaste, you move it to the front part of your brain, the analytical part, and you read every ingredient, you did a bunch of research, you looked at all the tests, you surveyed 100 friends, and then you made a new choice. It would take way too much time and you wouldn't get anything else done that week, but you might have a better toothpaste. You don't do that. You probably thought about it carefully at one point in time, made your choice, and you just use the same toothpaste until some new evidence overwhelms you. Your teeth get too sensitive and you get old and your dentist says, use Sensodyne. You're like, I'm not that old. Yes, you are. Use Sensodyne. Or the brand you have is too expensive and you got to get something cheaper. These are the things that will change your habits. Otherwise, you drink the same beverages, you use the same toothpaste because you don't have enough resources in the prefrontal cortex of your brain to make those kinds of decisions. We are designed to offload critical thinking to the back part of our brain where it becomes habits as fast as we can, because this is the part of the brain that will keep us alert to tigers chasing us, right? And snakes trying to bite us. We're aware of those things. This is the stuff that we can just do by habit. So values are formed up here and turned into habits back here. So when you want to change things, it's really hard. It's really hard to change values. You can do it, but it takes a lot of time because once they become habits, you just buy the same spiritual toothpaste over and over again. And marketing people, corporations know this, and they use it against us. We are very brand loyal, and we use our brands to express our individuality. Through social media, through the things we wear, our consumerism is how we become individuals. And when you say it like that, you realize how psychotic it sounds. But that's what we're doing. more values today. Consumption as expression, which leads to superficial satisfaction. We feel really satisfied in the moment that we're consuming something, and then we feel frustrated and empty and broke, and we have this debt. Individualism and self-reliance. Who here, be honest, close your eyes so that you all feel you can be honest. I'm just going to judge you from up here. Who here would rather Google a question than ask a person? Yeah. So, and I'm the same way. It's like, it's going to take time, or I'm embarrassed of the fact that I don't know this, right? There's all kinds of reasons. We could just ask ChatGPT or Google, and what's the difference anymore? And we can say, I don't want to admit that I don't know this. I don't want to ask a human for help because I got robots that will help me anonymously. It's individualism, right? And it is self-reliance. What does that ultimately do? It erodes our sense of community and our sense of connectedness to everybody else. Spiritualism is actually a value today. Spiritualism is on the rise. You might be thinking that atheism and stuff, no. All that new atheism stuff from 10 years ago was just a little blip. Spiritualism is on the rise, but it's spiritualism on a spectrum. It's brand designed, custom ordered spiritualism, and it's not any different in the Christian community than it is anywhere else. Everybody kind of cherry picks their own little app version of what they want to believe about God, about Jesus, about the Bible. They don't, even the most fundamentalists don't really fundamentally believe everything. They cherry pick the things they want, and they have a version that they say they live by, but there's no cost to it because it's formed in their own head. It's not formed in the context of community because of individualism. So spiritualism is really important, but it's based on personal experiences, a search for meaning drawn from personal philosophies. We no longer have experts and priests and people like that are vocationally committed to our spirit, that we defer to and look to guidance as much for. We are forming it ourselves. And social media is the primary spiritual formation tool that we are looking to as a generation versus humans, because of that other question I just asked you and most of you admitted to. So, in summary, the values of our culture today: individualism, self-reliance, perceived freedom, equality within limits, patriotism on the rise, achievement and status, informality. We definitely value informality, achievement and status, consumption, especially even consumption as a means of a form of connection, social media as a type of, it's like a form of connection that's not real connection, but it lets us think that we're connected to people, brand loyalty, and then this spectrum spirituality. Now, how would a countercultural revolution deal with these issues? With that list, what would a countercultural system need to offer to subvert that list of values? So, yes.
Centered spirituality.
Centered spirituality. Tell me what that means.
Something that can welcome people and their experiences, but have truth and substance and a core value system.
Okay, I like that. So instead of personal, private, I'm just basing this on whatever I feel, it's got more...
A little more structure.
Yeah.
While not shutting people down for their experiences, but something that can encompass us.
I'm not sure I track with the word centered in that, but I think it's more contextualized or like externalized.
Well, I guess I'm just speaking in contrast to your, like, on a spectrum.
Oh, okay. Balanced, maybe. Okay, I get centered in that kind. I was thinking of it like centered, like within the individual, but I see what you're saying, like balanced. Yeah, okay.
I was thinking about specific spirituality instead of just this vague, nebulous, I'm spiritual, but that doesn't mean anything. your truth is different than my truth, instead of saying this is
Specific spirituality? Okay. Yes.
Interdependence.
Interdependence instead of independence. Love that. So if we start at the top of this, I don't know if you can see those up there. Individualism and self-reliance, we're going to need to stay, we're going to need to become interdependent. And honestly, a culture that is individually dependent is going to be hungry for others, even when they don't know it, even when they resist it. When we offer up a community, they're going to lean into that, right? We're not saying to people, again, it's not about tearing something down, it's about offering something better. When we invite them into a community that is about relying on each other, we're modeling, and not just modeling, but doing something generative and positive. And we are building something that is a counter to what they're doing. Perceived freedom. This idea of perceived freedom, and I put that word in there because it's not real freedom. What's the counterculture to perceived freedom?
Accountability.
Accountability would fit in there, I think, yeah.
Commitment and a willingness.
Commitment and a willingness to give of yourself. I love that. Yes. Okay. Is that your name? Yeah.
Servitude.
Servitude. Like you guys, servitude, servanthood or serving, yeah. Not like prison servanthood. Like servitude is like serving attitude. Yeah.
Actual freedom.
Actual freedom. Like, so I remember, when you grow up as a fundamentalist, I had friends who grew up in Nashville in the Church of Christ or the Southern Baptist, all these rules. And when they broke out of it, they're like, I'm going to drink like crazy. Like, then you're just going to become a servant to that. Like, freedom is when you're free to do something and not to do something. True freedom in the context of community, where your highest expression of your freedom is to serve others. Now, patriotism, if that's a prevailing value, what's the countercultural response to patriotism? I'm gonna get myself in trouble this time.
Respectful citizenship.
Respectful citizenship. You're better than me.
Well, a huge issue that we see over and over again are these pendulum swings. We're just going from one error to the opposite error instead of providing the actual balanced center where we should be. Like, we want to offer community, but not conformity. Like the answer to individualism is not, come join this cult. It's find out that you can be your truest self in an interdependent community rather than being by yourself.
And I think keeping your relationship to your state in the proper hierarchy, which is going to be not the top. I grew up watching my grandpa argue with our neighbor over politics, and then they would hug, they would serve each other, they would help each other with anything, because they shared their values, and they shared so much more than what they disagreed about. We have been pitted against each other over things that were relatively, and most of it was fake, and now it's getting real. It's getting very, very real, and so we're getting very emotional about it. And if we can invert that back to the level of our actual values, and we keep that stuff at the top, then where does the nation actually fit? We've idolized this idea of our country, and it's become way too important. And then when people criticize things, if your people are in charge and things get criticized, then it's an attack on you personally or your spirituality or whatever. And it can go either way. But if we take it down a few notches and say, hey, our government leaders work for us, and the government is really just an expression, should be an expression of the people, and we should participate in as much as we feel like we can without it becoming a god to us. Once we get that down into the level that it belongs, then it's not in the habit part of the brain, it's in the front part, and we're able to think clearly about it, and not just trust that our team must be doing the right thing all the time. And we need that if we're going to be honest about anything else, right? And again, before we tear something down, we're offering people something winsome to step into. Informality, the only comment I have on this is that I do think people hunger for moments of formality. I think that we've gone into a life that is all jeans and t-shirts. I mean, I've prayed for that when I was a kid. I never wanted to dress up for anything. But there are moments in life where some formality is actually something people hunger for, because it says this moment is special. This space is special. Whether it's decorating a room, whether it's how we dress, whether it's sitting down at a table for a meal, there's moments of formality we've lost. And I think that as a people, going counterculture in that and saying, we're going to actually dress up as a group and we're going to have a nice meal together. We're going to do something that shows respect to each other. It shows, there's various things you could take some time and think about that. But I think that this sacralizing informality is something that's leaving a void. And we can step into that void creatively and artistically. Consumption as a form of connection. How do we become countercultural here? We know that consumption is a bastardized form of community, so how do we go against it?
Create.
Say it loud.
Creation. Not
creation as a form of community instead of consumption. Amen. So do something, get off your butts and actually create something together. It doesn't have to be commercially freaking viable. You don't have to make music that anybody outside of your group is ever going to hear. You don't have to go make a film that's going to make something, do something, create something. That's going to be the form of connection, not consumption. Just creating a conversation. Any of you listen to my podcast, I hope you see that a conversation is a form of art. I don't say it, but I try to demonstrate it. That when you sit down with somebody, it's not just you've got a point to make, they got a point to make, or they got something to promote. It's about the dance that goes back and forth between people. You're creating something there. So that's not just a form of consumption. Brand loyalty. What if we were to do something where when we got together, we consciously didn't wear anything that had brands on it? Like something like that. What if we just tried to become more aware of how we turn ourselves into personal brands? What if we recognize the imago Dei in the people in our community beyond the way that they're habitually having to feel like they brand themselves? What if we could see the beauty in people and speak it to them? What if we tell them the beauty that we see in them and hear in them and smell in them and taste when they make us their food, so that they don't feel the pressure that they feel on Instagram and all this other bullshit stuff that's making them think that they have to personally brand themselves? Would they be hungry? Would you be hungry for that kind of community? Do you feel like you could step into a group of 10 people that actually saw you and honored you and valued you, not putting filters on your face to remove your blemishes and making you look a little thinner than you were and a little younger than you were? If we can do that and create that kind of space, that is countercultural. People will want to enter into that and they won't want to leave. Yeah.
It's like, instead of like a brand loyalty, it's like a kingdom loyalty, where loyalty to the kingdom, God says, come as you are. Everyone comes as you are, not holding yourself to one brand and one specific identity. It's actually holding yourself, saying, we're loyal to the kingdom, which means everyone comes as they are. And then when you enter in, you start
Exactly. Exactly. And then spiritualism, this spectrum spiritualism, we talked about that at the beginning, finding something that can be specific, but also recognizing what are people actually hungry for, not eliminating people, so we set a welcome table. We recognize the hunger that they have for transcendent experiences, that are not going to necessarily happen. It's great to watch a film together and find the spiritual connections in the film, to go to a concert. But then we know people want actually transcendent experiences. And listening to a TED talk from a pastor and hearing kind of C- opening band worship music to open for the TED talk, that's great if that's what we can do, but that's not necessarily always going to be a transcendent experience. But then comparing your worship time on Sunday to like Sigur Rós and the best speaker you've ever heard is also using commercial criteria to judge your product by. So neither of those, that's not what I'm talking about at all. But what if 10 of you are gathered together in a time of prayer and reflection and worship and intimacy and seeking each other out? Like that kind of thing can become transcendent. And deep thinking and feeling and honoring and all of that stuff in a small scale thing. It's not going to move the needle on any influencer scale, but it's going to be revolutionary to those people. So even this novel that I just finished is a story imagined, but it kind of flows out of the last book I wrote, Jesus, Bread, and Chocolate, was all about trying to get away from the corporate values that define success. So coffee, bread, chocolate, beer, music, all these things that we judge them whether they're successful or not by how big they are or whatever. And I broke them down into some different values. And then we were on a backpacking trip with one of my older sons, and he said, how would you tell this as a story, like you used to tell us at bedtime? And I said, well, that's a good question. So I started making up a story around the campfire about a group of musicians in their 60s and 70s making music with college students, and it blended the music that they all loved. So one of the characters is Hispanic, one is a white guy from rural Tennessee, one is African American, they're all the older guys, and then a couple of college students, which are really based on a lot of the students I've worked with. And they just start making music because they are hungry for something authentic. And it's about what are we really looking for in music. We think, not all of you, but being in the spot I'm in, I have hundreds and hundreds of people coming. How do I get a record deal? How do I get a publishing deal? Can you take this song to this guy? Can you do? They think they need access to something to be successful. And I've learned to flip the question and help them wonder, what do you really want out of music? What's going to really bring you joy? How are you really supposed to be using your gifts? So I imagine a story in which this accidental band actually gets opportunities to go really big. And then it starts to undermine the reasons that they're doing what they're doing. And they have some hard choices to make. But I'm trying to ask the same kind of questions that I've been asking for 40 years in this business. All the way back to when I'm a kid. And I'm like, I just really want to play with Glenn Kaiser. That's all I want to do my whole life. And then you get to do it, and you're like, okay, now I want to be Glenn Kaiser. and I remember Glenn and I, my wife and I, and Glenn and Wendy did a show together. And after that show, they stayed at our house, and Glenn actually got in my face and said, what's wrong? Something's wrong with you. And he could tell that something was wearing on my heart. And we knew each other enough that he could get in my face about it. I remembered how revolutionary Cornerstone was to me as a kid. And it just set me on fire. And it did propel me through that first whole chapter of my own music to an extent, but really the True Tunes years. But that was all coming to a crash. And I was watching it all burn around me. It was all going up in flames because people they were basically not doing what they promised they were going to do. And Glenn sensed that. And he prayed with me, and he confirmed that what was happening was not right. And at that point, he said, at this point, I knew I was out of a job, and I had offers from Nashville, and he said, I don't think that it's the right time for you to go to Nashville. And I didn't either, so we didn't go. We did go a few years later, and at that time, he said, I do sense that this is the time for you to go. But this revolution, when we think we want to see revolution big, we want to see millions of people in the street, and we want to hear a song that everybody is singing, and we want anthems. I mean, I'm not lying. I would love that too. But that is the tip of the iceberg. What we need is the iceberg. What we need are lots of people in small groups gathering and doing this building that we just spent all this time talking, when we offer the counter to all of this stuff in small cellular ways, the organism can grow much more passionately, much more healthy than the organization that we're trying to subvert, right? So we start by building a positive thing, and we don't worry about burning down the other thing because people will lead it and they will embrace the new organism. And then we trust, if God's going to put his breath on a song and it's going to go across the world, God's going to do that. That's not our job. You know, I manage a worship team out of Chicago. They write worship songs for their own community. And one of their songs, a song called Make Room, blew up. It's like one of the top 25, 26 songs in the whole world. That's not because we've done any marketing or there's no hit version of it. We just re-recorded it to make more of a gospel version of it. But we just steward it. It's not some big celebrity thing. That's God's doing. We don't worry about it. But we have to know how the business works to be faithful stewards of it. So I'm honored to work with them. Thank you guys. This has been really great. You guys made it really, really cool.
God, we need you to shine. Shine your light on our hearts, God. Expose anything that's not like you, Jesus said. Shake up the crown of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Yeah, yeah. Hey, all my religion. Your way is so much better. So just shake it up. Shake up the ground. Do it, God. All my tradition. All my religion. Your way is the best way. Oh, Lord, do it, God. Shake up the ground. Shake it up. Break down the walls. Break it down. Your way is better. Your way is the best way. Oh, just shake it up. Shake up the ground. All my tradition. All my religion. Your way is better. Your way, God. I will make room for you. Come do whatever. I will make room. Oh, just for you. Just for you, God, and only you. Come do whatever you want. Whatever you want.
And that was it. Other than the great folks who stopped me throughout the rest of the day with their thoughts and reflections on what we had talked about. I'd love to hear from you, too. What do you think revolution should sound like? Do you hope music might start sounding more countercultural soon? I know I do. That's all for now. The Runout Groove is coming. If you dig the show, please subscribe and spread the word. Also, please leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our email list at truetunes.com, follow us on Facebook at TrueTunesNow, and find and follow our weekly Spotify Gallery Stage mixtape. You can find me on Twitter at John J. Thompson and on Instagram at TheOnlyJJT and at TrueTunesMusic. And you can support this show through our patreon.com/TrueTunes community or via a one-time tip linked on the show notes page. So tell your friends about the show, post it on your socials, and let us know what you think. Thanks.
True Tunes at 45 RPM is produced by John J. Thompson and Bruce A. Brown for Gyroscope Productions and is intended for the private use of our listening audience. The contents are protected by US copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exception of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten materials. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. Cheers. We'll see you next time.